Welcome into Terapod number 3. It is time, finally, to discuss Elden Ring, the real thing. It's here, and I've been playing through the game as much as possible on PS5 since Thursday, February 24th, and man, there's a lot to talk about. I adore this game. It's even better than I expected, and I expected a whole lot. So a few days ago, I sat down with my good pal Leland, aka Trilorim, a Twitch streamer and a diehard From Software fan, and we just totally geeked out about our first week or so with Hidetaka Miyazaki's new landmark game. Leland is currently streaming his entire first playthrough of the game, so give him a follow on Twitch or catch the VODs on his new YouTube channel. All those details are down in the description. And if you're concerned about spoilers here because you yourself are currently working your way through the lands between, don't worry. This podcast episode features a super spoiler conscious discussion. All the topics are carefully timestamped below, so feel free to jump around. And either way, we give plenty of warning before we touch on those topics. And even then, we don't divulge any kind of major spoilers. We're even quite careful about minor spoilers. Everyone I know has a different level of sensitivity to this stuff, but I assure you this is a pretty safe conversation. But I don't want to beat around the bush much more. I want to get into things. So this is my first public discussion about Elden Ring since the game's launch, and there's a lot to say and a lot more content to come from me right here on the channel in the coming months. I'm going to be doing video analyses of all aspects of this game: bosses, music, level design. I'm even hosting a little Elden Ring PvP tournament in a couple months with my Discord server crew. So click on the invite link down in the description to learn more, such as how to get involved, what kinds of prizes will be on the line, things like that. And lastly, if you not only want to further support what I do, in addition to unlocking a lot more content from me each and every month, such as my newsletter, exclusive podcast episodes, and more, head over to patreon.com/terapop and check out the tiers and benefits. But let's get into it. Let's talk about Elden Ring with my friend Trilorim.
You and we could spend the next 6 hours talking about this game. So that's why I was like, I started writing notes and I was like, no matter what I'm going to write, we're going to end up on tangents. We're going to be talking about whatever. Sure. Like we could stretch this out into like a 4-hour long podcast. So,
all right. Well, Leland, it's so good to be on with you. And thank you for making the time, because trust me, I know it's hard justifying making time for anything at the moment that isn't Elden Ring itself.
So true. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Tara. I've been eager to not only play this game, obviously, but we've been talking back and forth for months now leading up to the release of this game. And so it feels really good to finally be talking to you about your thoughts and my thoughts and just about, everything that we've experienced so far in Elden Ring in these first several days we've had with it.
Yeah, I suppose the idea was we were going to kind of recap our first week and we'll see how coherent or incoherent we are in doing that. But yeah, it's been, I guess, like a week plus. It's Sunday and we've both been playing since last Thursday, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think before we started the show, we were kind of talking a little bit about how much we've played into the game. I think I've got about 50 some hours logged so far. So yeah, definitely been spending a lot of my time with Elden Ring here.
Yeah, for sure. And let me know what you think of this too. Like every time a new FromSoft game comes out, I'm understandably overwhelmed with recency bias, with feelings of this is my favorite game ever. and like the 6 games, Demon Souls and onward to Sekiro, they're my favorite games ever. But Elden Ring is truly something special. And it's odd to be playing a game and constantly realizing that it represents everything you want and value in game design, almost as if it was personally made just for you to satisfy your taste. Is that how you feel too?
100%. I mean, yeah, like you said, with recency bias, it's super easy to just flat out say this is Miyazaki's greatest work so far, but it really feels that way. I mean,
yeah, I think it is, man. I think it is.
Yeah, I can pretty confidently say it might just be. And I've also been a big fan of the Soul series for a while now. I started with Sekiro, so it's kind of, I'm pretty new to the series considering I've only been playing for about 3 years, but it's been a full 3 years of countless repeated playthroughs of Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3, a couple runs a Dark Souls 2. Yeah, and I don't know, from these past 3 years of just constant playing and loving and just being fully enveloped in everything from Soft, it's hard not to pick up a game like Elden Ring that feels like it takes the best parts of the Souls series, Sekiro, Bloodborne, and it brings them all together and adds so much more too, you know. Yeah, this is where I start to feel incoherent. Like I'm just already like getting excited and want to just gush about how much I'm loving my experience with this game so far.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I think we're going to be stammering and stuttering our way through this plenty, and that's fine. I think anybody else who's been just neck deep in this game for the last week or two or three, or whenever it is you're listening to this, you get it. And yeah, isn't that interesting? Like the bit about this game being a sort of careful amalgamation of all the previous games. And that sounds like a nice talking point in like a promotional campaign, but I can say, yeah, I mean, you're what, 50, 60 hours in. I think I'm about 70 or something. Ironically, you've seen more of the game than me, but I think I've actually logged a little bit more time in the game. We're playing at like pretty different paces, which we could definitely talk about. But having played for like 70 hours, it really is all the best ingredients of like, you feel Bloodborne, you feel Demon Souls, you feel Dark Souls 3, like you feel the DNA in Elden Ring. It's so cool. But Leland, I do want to quickly set the table here. So because we're going to go deep. We're going to have, I guess, what I'm going to advertise as a very spoiler conscious discussion. So we're going to very carefully geek out about our first, 8-9 days with the game and probably go region by region. So if you're a listener to this podcast episode, no matter where you yourself are in the game, whether you're still kind of starting out or you've advanced and taken out a couple shard bearers, you can hang out for as long as you're comfortable or hop around based on the timestamps. But Leland, I do want to set the table here. So I was actually curious. I went back and found out that our first Twitter DM exchange was in June of last year. So I think I only had like a few hundred YouTube subscribers at that point, but you had, I guess, come across my content, giving me a follow on Twitter. And I remember checking out your Twitch channel and you were streaming, I think, Wind Waker and the new Mario Golf game. Does that sound right? For like June,
I think
late spring?
that sounds about right. So it's been not quite a year since we met.
Yeah, and very quickly into our first conversation, I realized you were this huge, authentic, diehard From Soft fan. And we just, we hit it off. We've been genuinely tight ever since. You're absolutely, and I don't just say this because we're on a recording right now, but you are absolutely one of my favorite people I've met along my YouTube podcast journey, and we've been able to connect on a lot of different levels, like totally. Just life stuff too. But it's it's great to have you on my new-ish podcast. And as you said earlier, it's right back at you, man. I always love talking From Soft with you. I feel like I've been able to clarify a lot of my own thoughts on these games throughout our discussions. But before we do dive deep, for anyone listening who doesn't know you, you touched on this just a little bit a minute ago, but you recently rebranded your channel. I know that's something you were wanting to do for a long time. Can you just kind of introduce yourself, your content platform, and briefly again recap your background with FromSoft's games?
Yeah, sure. My name is Leland. Twitch channel is called Trilorim. It used to be Shiny Cherrim for the longest time. That kind of goes back to I started as a shiny hunter, kind of exclusively in Pokemon, and that's where the name Shiny Cherrim comes from. It's literally shiny Pokemon. And the further I got into streaming, I kind of realized, there's a lot of different games that I like to play and like very thoroughly enjoy. Yeah, Shiny Cherrim just kind of felt like it felt like time to evolve from that phase.
Pun intended or no pun intended?
Definitely pun intended. Okay. Evolve like a Pokemon into my final phase. But and it took me a really long time. I know we've been, you've kind of been there for this journey of trying to figure out, what I wanted my rebrand to look like. I kind of settled on Trilorim. It's a combination of Tri from Triskelion, which is a symbol that I connect with pretty deeply through both my heritage and what a Triskelion symbolizes. Lore from Lorien from Dark Souls, and then Rim from Shiny Cherrim, because I wanted to kind of honor my my roots and where I started. So hence Trilorim was born.
I like that, man. I didn't know
Yeah.
the kind of etymology there. That's actually really cool and thoughtful. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it just kind of it kind of came together. It was I had a moment where I was like, oh yeah, I've got all these pieces that I appreciate, and I kind of put them all together. And yeah, here we are, Trilorum.
Well, very cool, man. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know the shiny hunting is still a big part of what you want to do moving forward. You just don't want to feel
Mhm.
pigeonholed to that exclusively. You want to feel like, hey, I can go on and stream or share content about whatever I'm playing at any time, whether it's
Right.
Pokemon or Soulsborne, whatever. Mario
Exactly.
Golf, right? Got to have some room for that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and then you also
Mhm.
started a YouTube channel for that for Trilorum as well, right? Where you're going to
Yeah,
start
I
posting some VODs.
yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I just started it. By the time this goes up, I'm hoping to have at least one, maybe two parts of my first playthrough of Elden Ring, which I've been streaming. I've been streaming every single time I, open up my Xbox and hop into Elden Ring. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun just kind of documenting my journey through my first playthrough with Elden Ring, for all my first interactions with NPCs, new areas, new bosses. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to have it recorded in history that I can kind of look back at it and think fondly of my first impressions within Elden Ring.
Well, and I give you credit too, man, because I think that's I don't know. I don't want to say it's a courageous thing to do, but you know what I mean? Like you're by streaming an entire playthrough of a new From Software game,
Mhm.
you're putting yourself in what a lot of people would consider a vulnerable position. And
Oh,
I don't think it
totally.
really is. I think it's like you're playing a game you're super excited about. Like there's nothing weird about that. But there is, I think online, there's almost two camps that most content
Mhm.
creators fall into when it comes to From Software's games. You're either like the blind newbie. It's like, oh my God, I've never played Dark Souls. Here we go. And or you were like the grizzled speedrunner, right? There's no
Oh
in
yeah.
between. And what I think is cool is that you're super passionate about these games, you know them well, and you're in between. And that's, like you said, it's a cool artifact that you're actually going to have all of your first impressions recorded for this
Mhm.
game. That's a pretty unique thing.
Yeah, and I think another part of it for me is I acknowledge that I'm not, a top level speedrunner of these games. I'm no Happy Hob or Dist as far as my skill level is with these games. I'm definitely more, I'm definitely experienced. I've got hundreds and hundreds of hours in FromSoft games, so I know the feel, I know the flow. I'm comfortable. So yeah, there's definitely kind of that, I don't know. There's this notion that you need to get good. That's kind of been it's been a meme in the FromSoft community for a while now, is you need to get good with these games,
Which you do, but
which
on the
is
other
true.
hand, there's more to it, right?
Exactly. And if anything else, it's going to be fun to have my first playthrough just recorded. So, once I'm at that like hundreds and hundreds of hours level into Elden Ring, and I am far more experienced, because I definitely plan on streaming different builds and playing through, doing some challenge runs, maybe dipping my toe in speedrunning a little bit. But I definitely know I'm going to get better at this game. I just wanted to give my completely unfiltered, dozens of deaths to bosses,
Oh yeah,
falling
warts
off
and all, right?
cliffs,
Like who cares?
warts
Just
and
go
all.
for it.
Who cares? I'm just gonna record it and release it, and it'll be there, and it'll be fun to look back at.
Just as
Um,
good Miyazaki-san intended.
yeah,
Warts and all, deaths and
warts and
all.
all,
Yeah.
deaths and all. And I've gotten into this routine of every time I sit down and do a 2 hour streaming session, I have to fall off a cliff at least once. that seems to be the uh that seems to be the pattern I've
Dude,
noticed so
I've
far.
died
So
from stupid falls so many
yeah.
times because
Uh-huh.
Twist, spoiler alert if you didn't know, Elden Ring is a platforming game. And I'm not even kidding.
No, it's
Like,
true.
sure, it's an action RPG, but if it has like a secondary genre, I'm arguing that it's a platformer. It's a 3D platformer. No joke.
No, definitely. I've fallen off many a time just jumping around with Torrent, thinking that I'll be able to make that jump with Torrent, and then lo and behold.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, man, tell me what your first just kind of big picture thoughts are on the lands between. This is definitely not Lothric. This isn't Lordran. This is different. And the more that I've played it, the more I've realized how different this game is flavor wise. What are your thoughts, just big picture Lands Between, this game world?
Yeah, totally. It's really hard actually to make direct comparisons to, you can't do one to one. Oh, Limgrave is Lothric, or Limgrave is, a very specific part of a particular game, because there's each region is so vast and so different within itself that it's hard to add up all the little pieces and all the little nooks and crannies of each of these primary regions of the game. And I think that's been my biggest picture impression of Elden Ring, is just it is kind of unto itself. It's its own. It's very much. It feels like its own entity, and it feels like a real like world that we haven't really experienced in a FromSoft game before, or at least we haven't experienced a world in the same way as we're experiencing Elden Ring, the world of Elden Ring, before in a FromSoft game.
Well, and I think what's interesting is that the Lands Between is closer to its glory days than the worlds of Dark Souls were, like you can feel the history, like you're a little more within arm's reach of the history and the big players in Elden Ring, which I think is interesting. Things feel a little mythological for sure, but I think slightly less so than Dark Souls. Would you agree with that?
Totally. They definitely feel like truly lived in, whereas in Dark Souls, you see all these undead monstrosities that are all a product of that world ending. You're feeling like you're living through the mythology, whereas here you see the soldiers, you see these Leyndell warriors in Limgrave walking around. You're like living the history of this world, so it definitely feels like a more, I don't know, lived in and current timeline that you're engaging the areas with, which really for me has breathed life into your interacting with the environment. And it really shows that, Miyazaki and, the FromSoft team thought really hard about how to make an open world like work for their type of game.
I mean, think about the Dark Souls trilogy. Like one of the last events of consequence in that trilogy plays out in an ashen dune field. And then think about those first steps into Limgrave, like the difference it does. It almost feels like rebirth or something. And like just the colors and the life. I mean, seeing deer and birds and goats and stuff. It's just like, this is a real living, breathing place that's certainly corrupted, but not to like the ruined extent that was the world of Dark Souls. So I think it's, it's cool. And for that reason, it's maybe even a little more complex. It feels like there's definitely some abstract and obtuse like ideas in this game. I mean, based on what we had heard through the promotional campaigns, I kind of didn't know what to expect from the storytelling and the lore and the NPCs. And I don't know, man, to me, this doesn't feel like some mainstream watered down version of a FromSoft story. It feels complicated.
Yeah, totally. I think that, with previous titles, you look at the world, the mythology, it all kind of comes together in a way that it feels very like high fantasy or very high dark fantasy, like with Dark Souls 3, to a point where a lot of people, it felt too convoluted. You look at people who really delve into the lore, you felt like you really had to put in an effort to understand what what lighting the flame really meant in that game. Whereas with Elden Ring, you jump in, you're like, okay, I'm a part of this world, and the story is coming to me very naturally, I would say. And it comes to a new player far more naturally than it does in Dark Souls, where it feels like you need to really think and deeply consider these high fantasy obscure phrases and stuff like that that you're thrown at right from the get-go, and you're trying to figure it out. You feel like you have to catch up a little bit with previous titles, whereas here you're like, it feels like you're kind of at the start, and that goes back to it being a living world, and you're living the history that's being made. You feel definitely more of a part of the story right from the get-go, whereas in DS3, for example, you gradually start to understand your position in the story and what as the protagonist in that game means and what you're accomplishing. That's kind of like late game things that you start to determine and start to figure out. Whereas in Elden Ring, it feels like you're thrown into it definitely, but the tasks you need to achieve become apparent very quickly in Elden Ring.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking back to Dark Souls. The subtitle of that game could have been like "Late to the Party" or something. Like that's what all those games feel like. You're having to learn so much about that world. A lot of the big events have already transpired. Again, it's a world at its end, and I like that point that you made. Like you, the player character, are much more central to the story in Elden Ring. The historical events are actually unfolding. I mean, some of them have happened, yes, but the history is still very much unfolding. But at the same time, I couldn't like write you up a doctoral dissertation right now on the Golden Order. Like it feels, it's abstract in the right places, in the right ways, I think. And I don't know. I got a lot of flavor text reading to do and to catch up on. Totally. I have so many items. I keep meaning to go back and like read, and I've taken screenshots of like dialogue and just so many random things that I'm trying to remember because I'm really staying blind. Like I'm not looking at video content. I'm not obviously looking at guides. I'm not looking at wikis or anything. I mean, I'm going as blind as possible. I'm just taking some notes. And so I'm very much trying to remember key details. And I don't know, it's been interesting. Are you doing that too, or are you dabbling a little bit online?
I am also staying as blind as possible, which is really hard because there's a lot of great content makers that I want to engage with the videos and stuff. But I've also been pretty blind. I jump into Twitter now and then to see what's going on there. I haven't been spoiled so far, thankfully, on any major bosses or anything like that. But yeah, it's been really fascinating going into this game blind, which I haven't been able to do previously. I guess Sekiro I was a little bit, but my brother and I were playing that game together, and this is like my true blind FromSoft experience. And yeah, it is a whole nother level of appreciation for these games that you gain by doing it that way. At the same time, I watched all the trailers leading up to it. Anything that FromSoft released as far as like interviews or on the website, so it wasn't like truly blind. I know some creators, like I think Lobos Jr., he was like true blind. He did like he just was completely shut out for Elden Ring. But yeah, it's well worth it to go into a game like this with as little information as possible, because it's been an absolute joy reading all the flavor text of every single item and being like, oh wow, okay, I met that character way early on. This is an item that pertains to them, which connects them to this storyline. Yeah. So yeah, even though I just said about DS3 that a lot of the lore, the deep lore and stuff, is definitely not lost in Elden Ring. There's a ton of deep lore. There's a ton that we still need to dig into, and I'm sure we'll continue to need to dig into even after completing the game. So even though it feels like you have a better grasp of what your purpose is and what the story is, like you said, I don't really know much about a lot of the shard bearers still, even ones that have already fought. So yeah, a lot of that deep lore stuff is going to be super like fascinating and fun to delve into once I finally beat the game, which it's probably not for a little while yet.
Right. Well, in classic FromSoft fashion, I can already tell it's going to be difficult to sense when the credits are coming, because we were talking before we started recording just about kind of where we both are in the game. And I told you where I left off, like the last big point where I left off. And I was going into that thinking like, okay, I'm pretty sure the game keeps going, but it also could end. Like I could be very, very close. This could be like a penultimate boss or something. Like you just never know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm trying to be super conscious about spoilers and stuff. So coming up with phrasing for certain parts of the game is going to be a little tricky on the fly. But when you reach the point in the game where there's a character who basically kind of explains what your main objective is as far as the Erd Tree goes and the shards and all that. I've had to talk to that character so many times, and I still don't fully know exactly what's going on.
It's a lot, man. It's a lot. And I honestly feel like, of course, if this film, The Wrong Heirs, I would just be called like, you know, fanboy, From Soft worshiper or whatever. And it's also like, yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of From Software. If you think that's a bad thing, then so be it.
This probably isn't the show for you.
You're probably listening to the wrong podcast, but I actually think they undersold the game. I'm being dead serious. Like I really, and I don't just mean like they weren't showing us all the cards in their hand. Like we knew that, but I mean like the ambition and the creativity and just the scale and scope of the game. I think they completely undersold it. Like we had no idea. I mean, I did feel after playing the network test in November that I basically knew what the deal was. And it's like, okay, you know, maybe there's a snowy region, maybe there's a weird desert region, but I basically played Elden Ring and I hadn't at all. I was just playing earlier today and I went back to Limgrave from where I currently am to like, just, you know, of course, one of a million loose ends I have. This could definitely be called multitasking the game. And I was like, whoa, it was so weird actually being back in Limgrave for the first time in like forever. Really serene and nice. And I exhaled like actually while playing the game. Yeah, like it's been some hours in game since I just hung out here because that is not representative of the entire game, that one region.
Oh, totally. And I actually just yesterday was playing with a friend who he's still in Limgrave. He hasn't beaten that kind of first main boss that leads you into the castle.
Margit, right? We can say Margit.
Yeah, we can say Margit.
Yeah, Margit. Godrick. Some of the terminology that From gladly shared in their promotional videos and stuff, I'm fine with us just talking about openly.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, he still hasn't beaten Margit. So we were just kind of wandering around Limgrave, and I had that similar experience to you where it was like, wow, it's been like probably 20, 30 hours since I last just came back to a lot of these places and just actually I was just walking around Limgrave because you can't have torrent when you're doing multiplayer, and it was really nice to slow the pace down to where I was just on my feet again, literally on my feet again, you know, not flying through Limgrave on torrent to check out this cave that I spotted on my map that I haven't seen yet, or fast traveling to one and cruising point A to point B on torrent to try to get this task done. I was literally just kind of meandering around, and I was discovering things like with my friend in this area that I'd, you know, spent tons of time in. I was like, oh wow, here's a set of ruins that I haven't really seen yet. Oh, it transports me to this part of the game that I haven't even seen yet.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Like I've spent 50 hours in the game. My buddies spent maybe like 4 or 5 hours in the game. And I ended up having to take on a boss that I hadn't even experienced yet in that same area. It's unreal the level of like
the density, right?
The density is crazy. It's great.
Well, let's just jump in with Limgrave and Stormveil, and we'll just kind of go location by location a little bit to give ourselves some structure here. So yeah, I mean, Limgrave, what were your first impressions? And then let's obviously talk about Stormveil, which is kind of the crown jewel of the region. But what were the first couple hours like?
It was a lot of, oh my God, I'm finally here. my first impressions of Limgrave were just all sheer excitement and joy of finally being in a new FromSoft game.
Well, and what was the most fun for you? Was it combat with random mobs? Was it getting into some of the mini dungeons? Was it just traversal and torrent? What were you having the most fun with in like the first 5 hours or so?
Yeah. So like you said before, we've kind of both had kind of different approaches as far as, you know, how we've taken on the map. And my approach has been explore, explore, explore. And so I'll hit a boss and be like, okay, I'll mark that you're here on the map, and we will fight later. Like so my first few hours were a lot of just, yeah, like you said, running around on torrent and trying to like find the different map pieces. Yeah, once I found my first map piece, I was like, okay, I'm hooked. We need to open up this map as quickly as possible. So, and I pretty much I kind of did the perimeter on Limgrave.
When you pieced out, didn't I see that on Twitch? You basically went south pretty quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. I think I went from Limgrave. I might have even gone into what's it called? The peninsula, the Weeping Peninsula.
Yeah.
I might have even done that before a lot of the stuff in Limgrave, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know. And I still to this day haven't beaten the tree sentinel.
Oh
I marked him on the map and I was like, okay, you're the final boss of Elden Ring, as far as I'm concerned.
You're my rainy day project.
Yeah.
Tree Sentinel. Dude, the Tree Sentinels are legit. They're really well designed.
Gosh,
they're hard. You were talking about
Mhm.
get good earlier. You want to get good at
Yeah.
Elden Ring. Fight a Tree Sentinel solo,
Yes.
shieldless, without torrent. Do that for an hour and see how much better you will get.
I know, for real. And yeah, there's another, at least there are multiple tree sentinels. And there's one outside the one of the major areas that you and I were talking about earlier. That one in particular,
hardest boss in the game up until that point, in my opinion.
Oh yes, I died more to that tree sentinel than any other boss I'd faced that far in the game.
He was brutal. He was so brutal. And I actually think FromSoft did show him off in that November gameplay showcase. I believe he did appear in that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah.
But either way, yeah, you see him and it's like, oh, another one of these guys. Sure, no problem. And oh yeah, he killed me. I think I died like 12 times, 15 times maybe. Seriously, I died a lot.
But it's a good skill check for that point in the game. It's a perfect like checkpoint. Like you see this boss and you're like, okay, I know what this is going to be about. And then boom, like you're not passing until you're good enough to beat me type thing. And it's worth your time to like, again, get good and practice and get more comfortable with your builds and what you can do damage wise. It definitely caused me to go level up. I'll come back to this later. I'll go explore other things, get new equipment. And I don't know, that's been another really positive experience I've had with a lot of these open world bosses, is like they're really good gauges for like a level check, basically. Like, are you good enough to be here right now in this particular area?
Yeah, I actually think I've been running the game kind of under leveled. Yeah, a couple times a field boss has like just one or two shotted me, and it's like, okay, I think I shouldn't be here until I, get 5 more levels or something.
Yeah, another big one like that for me was when because I of course went south immediately, and I went to the southernmost point of the Weeping Peninsula.
Okay.
And there's a boss at basically the southernmost point of the map that was a big level check for me, as far as the amount of damage they were dealing and the amount of damage I was dealing or wasn't dealing.
That boss was one of my first huge wow moments in the game, because we had seen footage of Godrick. I had fought Margit already in the network test, dipped my toes into Stormveil with the network test. So it's just, that boss was like the first thing where I was like, okay, this is new. This is like Elden Ring. Like I'm just in the meat of Elden Ring now. And oh yeah, that was a total pressure cooker situation, coming in hot, fast, aggressive, ripping your head off. Yeah. Awesome fight.
Yeah, totally. And the weapon gained from that fight.
Oh yeah. That's a pretty good bonk stick, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And as a strength build. So let's talk about our characters maybe a little bit. This might be a good segue into that. I am currently running a Dark Souls 3 build. I'm running a Dark Souls 3 heavy claymore build that I initially was gonna kind of go even on.
Thy middle name is creativity.
Exactly. I was gonna do faith strength build. However, I found a claymore, and that kind of set in stone. Like, okay, I'm going strength. So I think I only have like 15 in faith right now.
It's fair, man. It's fair. I mean, it's first playthrough, right? There's going to be years to experiment in this game.
Yeah, and I knew that I wanted my second playthrough to be sorcery of some kind, and I wanted a lot of my, I guess you'd say, attacking spells and incantations to kind of be experienced in that second playthrough, which seems kind of counterintuitive in that, a lot of people have been, especially with the network test, everyone was raving about the incantations as far as, faith is viable now as far as being able to actually attack with it. which is why I wanted to do strength, faith. But I've been using a lot of utility and healing and stealth type incantations to kind of traverse the world a bit more comfortably. And it's honestly been really helpful. So maybe not a true faith build, but I've got, a splash of faith in there that's been kind of making my life a little bit easier while I'm swinging my heavy claymore around.
Sure. What Ashes of War are you using on that claymore?
So I've been playing around a little bit with it. I think I initially was using it's like the slashing one where it's the kind of wild slashes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went into the stomp with the uppercut, which has been pretty cool.
Nice. I actually love the stomps. Like, they're not that sexy, but they're just really useful. I've actually been using them quite a bit as a sorcerer. Just sometimes, like, when somebody's getting a little too close for comfort, it's just like, all right, hello, give me some breathing room here. I think the stomps are awesome.
But yeah, I've been, so my Ashes of War haven't been super I guess I haven't been super creative with them, mostly because I've been kind of true strength build. So I haven't really dabbled in a lot of the different, faith, fire, any of those. I did find I've found some pretty crazy ones though, on unique weapons that I've found throughout. Whenever I pick up a weapon, I'm like, okay, what's this Ash of War look like? Oh my God, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I found a hammer that basically you create like a path of fire with. You basically slam this hammer down and it's just a choo-choo train of fire. It's the craziest weapon art I've ever seen. It's amazing. So yeah, there are definitely some pretty wild Ashes of War that I'm excited to
when I'm also fine like talking about weapons here. I can't remember if I messaged you this or not, but I recently started leveling up Eleonora's pole blade. Do you know that weapon?
I'm not off the top of my head. I don't have a lot of the names down.
Okay, blood twin blade is what I'll say. It's a blood twin blade.
Okay.
Basically looks like Darth Maul's lightsaber, but it's like the weapon skill is just, it's so crazy. It's like Gale's greatsword's weapon skill times 3, but with blood. So it's so cool. Like, it definitely, because it's a twin blade, it definitely doesn't hit as hard as certain weapons, but you're able to do so much DPS. And then with the blood, element, it's I mean, I think I only have it like plus 6 or 7 right now, and I was still wrecking guys, doing work. It's so awesome. Cool. The weapon skills, which I think, like, as you know, I did like a whole video about this before Elden Ring came out, but you always have those two crowds of people where people just, they see a cool weapon skill and it's like, oh my God, that's awesome. That's fun. I want that. And then you get the people who are like, well, they're not practical and they're not optimized and they're not, and it's like, look, then don't use them. Like, I don't know what to tell you, like R1 spam or have fun using the weapon skills. Like, it's one or the other. Like, I really feel like, yet again, FromSoft went above and beyond and just put so much effort into these sick animations and all these sick weapon designs. I mean, do you realize how many unique assets their artists created for this game? It's insane.
Yeah, for real. It's crazy. But yeah, and that same argument was the same thing for Sekiro with the what were they called, like the shinobi skills or whatever. A lot of people were like, oh, those are all, you don't even need those throughout the playthrough. But it's like, but they're sick. Like, why would you?
The umbrella is awesome. Like, why would I? Yeah,
why would you not use them?
Yeah, this stuff's just cool, and it just gives you more flexibility, and that's. And those are probably the same people who complain that Sekiro has one weapon. Not going to convert those types, but bottom line, Elden Ring's Ashes and weapon skills are awesome. I'm curious what you think of the whole Ashes system. I really like it. I know when the network test came out, people seemed like kind of 50-50, like this is kind of needlessly convoluted, and other people were like, oh, this is just cool and I can super duper optimize my weapon. And that's how I feel. Yeah. And I like the low commitment level too, how you can just walk everything back, switch between weapons. I'm really into it. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm super into it too. And I mean, it basically, for me, it isn't super convoluted because we had to do all the different gems, right? In Dark Souls 3. So it basically replaces gems and also has a skill already integrated into it. And you can switch rather than having to switch, or go to Andre and boom, okay, now this is a sharp katana or whatever, you just you go to the new blacksmith, and basically you can combine 2 in 1, and it's really easy to toggle, and it allows one weapon to have way more options and be way more versatile because of the Ashes of War, and it has the added buff, the stat buff, dependent on which ash you choose. I don't know. I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I think it's a really, well integrated system into the game. So, but speaking of ashes, we've also got the spirit ashes.
True. Are you taking to those? Are you using them a lot?
I am loving them.
Yeah.
It's basically like my excuse to have a summon with me, and it's like okay to summon people for boss fights.
Right, because you're not technically summoning an NPC or another player. You're using these cool spirits, and I actually think that was probably the philosophy, to maybe make people feel a little less guilty. And it's like, no, these are just cool. Like they'll help you, but they're also cool, and they're all enemies for the most part you've encountered and defeated yourself in the game, so you feel some ownership over using them. And I think it's super cool. I've definitely peppered them in at times as well. I don't know, the purist in me, I always feel a little bad. I used the wolves on the he was in the trailer. I'll say like the Briar Knight, you know who I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It's kind of a DS2 situation, aggressive boss, relatively small room. I popped the wolves on that one, and I didn't feel too bad about it. But for the most part, I've been trying to reserve them more for the big kind of mob field encounters and things like that, which is pretty fun.
They're great for that. And I've been using the wolves pretty much the entire time. Like, I've got a couple other spirit ashes that, not spoiler free, but there's some pretty awesome,
some powerful ashes. Ones,
really powerful ones that are so fun to summon in, to boss fights, and to just have
they are conducive too to being like more of a mage, which I thought was kind of interesting as well, because they do tax your FP. So I was finding that, like, as I continued to increase my FP, it's like, okay, like I have even more capabilities with my spirits, which is pretty cool. I don't know. It's like, you don't have to use them if you don't want to, but they're a lot of fun.
Totally. And I've definitely shamelessly been summoning in people to help with some of the bosses. I actually I was just messing around. I was like, oh, I should put my soapstone down here, or what's it called? The furled finger.
Yeah,
I'll put my sign down here, and we'll just see. And like I put it down, and within a split second, I was summoned in. And so the first time I actually beat one of the main bosses, one of the shard bearers, was as a summon.
That's actually kind of cool. World.
It was pretty fun. It was cool. It was like a very triumphant thing. Like, okay, that was cool. Like, now I got to go do that in my world, and it's actually been really fun. Like having people come in and doing the PvP experience together. And again, I'm totally cool with doing this for my first playthrough. I'm trying to, in some senses, cruise through the game. Like, obviously experience these boss fights that are a huge and important part of the game. I've been trying to take them on kind of 1v1 at first and like get a decent feel for them. But it's also totally part of the Elden Ring experience to bring people in to help, and like, I don't know, that feeling of camaraderie of defeating a boss together is also a big part of the game. So
for sure. I mean, there's no shame in it, because that's how they design the game. Like that's part of the game. And I think a player like you too, like you're just so curious with these games, and you're also just so ravenous. Like you just want to devour this game right now, that I know you'll go back and probably torture yourself with some of these bosses. But like, I was looking last night at the PlayStation trophy statistics, which I always find those percentages to be so interesting. Based on those percentages, people are not just summoning their way through these bosses either, because given where I was telling you I am in the game, I mean, those last couple bosses are like, I think 7-8% completion rates right now, which part of that is definitely like people, having the time and the opportunity to progress that far in the game, but then it's difficulty as well. I mean, there's such a drop off with those percentages after like Margit, and then it drops with Godrick, and then beyond there, you're in the 20s, and then you're in the teens, and then you're in like single digits. So, and I guess even if we're like, who cares, right? Like whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like my current goal for this playthrough is to enjoy this playthrough, like
that's a good goal.
I don't need to I don't need to, obviously I've been enjoying the challenge. Like my fight with Godrick was one of my favorite fights.
Yeah.
Period. Like learning his moveset
He's awesome.
So much fun. He's so cool. He's all over the arena, but he's also, he's a great first. He's one of the shard bearers, right?
Yeah.
So he's a great first shard bearer to encounter because he looks super intimidating. He's all over the arena. Halfway through, he cuts his own arm off or whatever.
That cutscene, man. How about that? Let's just talk about that cutscene for a minute, because I couldn't believe it, because they definitely didn't show that off, and I had no idea that was coming. No. We see the image of him with the dragon arm.
Right.
So it's like, okay, and you see the petrified dragon in the courtyard. So it's like, all right, like we're going to get there at some point, but I don't know how we get from A to Z. And boy, he went from A to Z, didn't he? And
yeah. It's kind of spoilery. The cutscenes, that's a little bit spoilery, but at the end of trailers, you see Godrick with a giant dragon.
We're not actually telling you how he makes it happen, but he makes it happen, obviously.
He makes it happen.
I think I posted my Discord server that he makes Gascoigne look like a good little schoolboy with that cutscene.
Oh my gosh.
Like that is just right? and him screaming, and just he is so desperate and unhinged. And interestingly, he actually feels, which this is unique for a FromSoft boss, he doesn't really have any redeeming qualities. Like he is actually just kind of evil and screwed up and corrupted and right and like deluded.
Just walking around Stormveil, you just feel it. Like leading up to it, you're like, there's something very wrong here. Around every turn, there's some sort of twisted detail throughout that entire dungeon. And then you get to Godrick and you're like, okay, yeah, this guy's messed up. This guy is evil. This guy's bad.
He seemed pretty dignified the way they presented him. Obviously, the body horror elements were there. But in the trailer, the now famous line, command me, kneel. He seemed more dignified than he actually is. He's actually just a madman.
Yes.
Yeah. And
total madman.
Leland, how about the NPC after the boss battle?
Oh my gosh.
That is my favorite thing maybe ever.
Like, ever. So good. So good.
And how long it went on for too.
Forever.
Like it's not just like one line for 5 seconds. It goes on for like probably 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm. I know. When I left, I was like, I wonder if I came back here like, when I finally beat the game, if I came back here, he's probably still there.
Love that guy. Respect that guy forever.
Mad respect to that.
Just
guy.
Letting it out. Hey, I'm an advocate for that. Just let it off your chest, man. Get it all out.
Oh man.
But yes, so Stormveil, I guess we're kind of incidentally now talking about Stormveil.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, the level design here, it's insane. I mean, this is what I was talking about with like underselling the game. I had no idea how vast these legacy dungeons were going to be. I mean, I feel like you can't even compare the best levels from the previous games to what's on display here, because it's just, there is no comparison. It's crazy.
Yeah. There's definitely, I need to go back to Stormveil. There's definitely parts of Stormveil I left unexplored, and I spent hours in Stormveil.
Yeah.
It still felt like, I feel like I'm still scratching the surface here. There's definitely still stuff, probably still weapons and secrets and all sorts of treasures still here that I haven't touched yet.
When I had heard that kind of consensus take from a few early accessors of the game, people who had put like 100, 200 hours in the game, like still have no idea how to do like 10 different things. No idea. And this game does feel like the secrets almost remind me, because I'm like a huge retro FPS fan, Doom and Quake and stuff. And like the secrets in Elden Ring almost remind me more of secrets in like a retro FPS game or something, just super obtuse. You have to like wall hump to like get a wall to open to find this super obscure thing or something like it. And it's probably the vastness, because I think back to like some of the better designed levels in the previous games. And I think it's just the scope here. Like they've always been good with secrets, but when you're dealing with the real estate of something like Stormveil, the secrets are just going to be crazier. They're just going to be harder to find. And there's also been like a joke going in my Discord server that we're all just obsessively looking over every ledge at all times, just peeking over ledges perpetually.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. One of my highest rated, because I've been putting not a ton of messages, but I've been placing messages as I go. And my highest rated, the one that's got the most appraisal, is one that I put at the end of a ledge that took me like 10, 15 minutes to navigate myself to this ledge in Stormveil. And there wasn't anything there. And my note is like, no treasure ahead or something like that. And that's my highest rated message. So that shows that like, everyone is doing it. Everyone's trying to like
Oh
go to
yeah.
every nook and cranny in these places. And yeah, there's going to be plenty of secrets that are going to take us all such a long time to figure
Yeah.
out.
I hope there's a couple that it's like a year or something before somebody finds that, like I hope there's a few that are just so deeply baked into this game. Have you, I mean, because this is a very like obvious feature of Stormveil, figuring out how to access it's another matter, but have you figured out the big elevator tower in Stormveil? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like by one of the sites of grace, there's multiple levels and there's clearly like square space for an elevator to go up and down, but you can't access the elevator and it's not clear where it is. That one took me a long time to figure out.
Yeah, I think I figured that one out, and it was kind of by accident too. But yeah, that one took me a while too, because you kind of keep coming back to it a little bit as you go, like continue to go up and down around the perimeter, around the walls.
Well, and you can often see where you need to end up, right? You can often see where you need to go. And it's just like, okay, how do I get down there? Or how do I get up there? Or there's a few good instances of that where you'll be like in a dungeon and on like a roof or a platform above you, there's a corpse with an item. And it's like, wait a minute, how would you even get up there? And then immediately like the mind starts turning and you start thinking back to how you got to where you are. And yeah, it's just so cool. And I definitely didn't appreciate how the jumping mechanic was going to be so central to the game. It's not just, oh, you can jump now very freely with one press of a button. It's like, no, they added the jumping because they were going to design the dungeons to accommodate platforming. And I don't think we understood that,
No. Yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting how, like, it's truly essential to navigating these legacy dungeons is being able to jump.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's essential to the gameplay of the whole game, right? Of the experience, whether you're out in the fields or you're, in a legacy dungeon, which I've always kind of had a soft spot for Dark Souls platforming. I think about the chapel in Orlando as like one of the first, great examples of that, or Sen's Fortress or something. But this is just a completely different level. And the way that I just don't know how they did it. I actually don't even know how they created this game in 5 years? Like, how did this game not take 15 years to create? I have no idea how they did it. And like the level of quality is so consistent no matter where you are in the game. There's been very few elements of the game that have disappointed me on any level.
Oh, totally. Especially when it comes to, like any sort of like glitchy, buggy sort of things. I haven't really encountered any of that on Xbox, at least. I know there was some issues with, was it PC release? But that was more so, that had nothing to do with the world itself necessarily, right? It was just kind of like crashing issues, FPS issues.
Yeah, there were clearly a couple issues on PC, I think, at launch, but I already believe they patched.
Yeah, they patched them out.
Yeah,
I think.
There were a lot of torch and pit, not a lot, I should say, a vocal minority of torch and pitchforks types, in those first couple of days, like going after FromSoft and acting like this was Cyberpunk day one or something. And it's like, look, there's some optimization issues with PC. They apologize. They promised to fix it in a patch. They're already doing that. So
but yeah,
and then that's the thing too. Like the frame rate drops a bit, which was the case in the network tests, and I wasn't really shocked to find that. But it just goes back to like the content of the game. Like that does annoy me in some games, but I'm just so enthralled in what I'm doing at any time in Elden Ring that like, I'm conscious when it dips from like 60 to 50, but it's never, I don't know, like the game's just so good that it's like if you have 9 good things and one kind of crappy thing out of 10 things, like I'm just not going to get that upset about the one thing. Like, I don't know what some people want. Do they want this to be like a heartless, soulless game that maintains 60 FPS no matter what, like that.
Right. There needs to be a little bit of give for the amount of things that have gone into this game very clearly. As far as like from a graphical standpoint, I think it looks great. And the amount of, just think of the amount of like assets that go into a particular area that you're in, and then looking out. It's mind-blowing how well it does run. For me, those moments.
No loading screens either, unless you die, right? So there's the occasional like elevator or tunnel where they're clearly, funneling you through so that they can render the area of the world ahead of you. But there's no breaks in the game.
Yeah, no, it's
So
definitely not world breaking by any means.
no,
Like every time because yeah, I've noticed a couple instances where, the FPS dips a bit, but it's not, it doesn't take you out of the game. It's definitely, it hasn't been world breaking to me.
yeah.
Like for me, I acknowledge it and I'm right back in. It doesn't take me out even for a second.
Yeah. FromSoft, I'm glad their priorities are straight. I mean, their priorities are gameplay, combat, art direction, that kind of stuff. They've never been the best at optimizing their games. They're not these
Mhm.
total technical wizards. They're just not. But I don't know, because again, there's studios that are making games that are locked 60, but the games have like no heart and soul. Like there's no reason why I'd ever pick up and play them. So
Mhm.
I don't know. It almost feels like complaining that like Steph Curry isn't 7 foot tall or something.
Yeah.
It's like, no, but he's like the greatest shooter ever. And it's like, yeah, but it'd be
Right,
nice
yeah.
if he was 7 foot, wouldn't it be? And it's like, yeah, I guess it would be, but also he's the greatest shooter ever. So let's
Yeah.
just appreciate that for a second. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it, I guess.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I think I feel pretty similarly to that.
I even noticed with Godrick, like they make you uncomfortable, but just by getting him in the air a lot, his cannonball dives and stuff, like they can definitely kill you. They can definitely hit you, but I feel like it's more just the intimidation factor. When you have a boss above your head, you're nervous.
Oh, totally.
And you might make a mistake if you're nervous. So it just feels like such a good test, but it's also crazy how you have a boss who's not probably not all said and done as tough as Gale, but he's animated like Gale. And he moves like Gale, right?
Whips
But he's
around the arena
the
like Gale.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great learning experience for that same reason. Those moments where he literally does that big tumble and he like swirls, he does like a full 180 around you, like all across the arena, and then he leaps up after that. And it's just your first interaction with that is going to be, of course, heavily intimidated, like scared by the sheer speed of this giant foe. But the more you face him, that moment is when you can take advantage, because you're like, okay, he's moving, he's doing his tumble attack, he's going to jump up. That's when I roll and then can get a couple attacks in. So it's like a perfect teaching moment to a new player of like, okay, this is how I start to recognize these attack patterns and how I can take advantage of these patterns and like learn when I can attack and when I should move out of the way and when I should maybe block or heal. I think Godrick's like the perfect test of, well, obviously strength and how your character's leveled right now, but also just your current level of knowledge of the combat system in this game.
Mm-hmm. Leland, have you noticed as you've progressed through how many more bosses in this game than any other are actually programmed to punish you when you go for the L2 weapon skill or the heal?
Yes.
Like
goodness.
That's the way like the programming works. Like they're cued when you do that, almost like another player would be, right? Like if you and I were in a PvP duel and you back rolled away from me and went to chug, I know that's a moment of vulnerability for you. So I'm going to try to close the distance. But when you go back to, DS1, DS2, basically almost no bosses do that because the programming wasn't as advanced enough to do that yet. So it's been crazy to play through and actually have that kind of experience where it feels like the boss AI is reading you.
They totally, it's definitely advanced in that regard. And I think it clicked for me most with actually an NPC invasion, because you're on the same playing field. It feels like you're doing PvP, but I noticed that the way it was reading my attack patterns was way way better than even like DS3, as far as like, yeah, okay, this is when I'm going to heal, and they definitely knew that. Yeah, it seems like the level of aggression has also ramped way up too across the board. As far as there are a lot of bosses that are like high aggro, in your face, do not give you a moment to like breathe. There's a lot of bosses that are hard to like back way out, unless you have spells that you can cast to like stagger or keep them back and keep them moving. For me as a melee build, it's been very evident that there's a major spike in the level of aggression and aggro for these bosses, and it's been crazy. My blood is pumping every time I enter a boss fight. It's fantastic.